Hi, I'm David Hankins.
And I'm Paul Hankins.
We're co-creators of what we hope is everyone's favorite comic book, Power Squared. This is a Week in Power Squared, sort of a special edition. We're going to talk about, so you want to do a Kickstarter, which is something we also discussed on our podcast, On the Air with Power Squared. But we thought people learn differently, and it might be helpful to see a visual instead of just listening to it. So why did we decide to do a Kickstarter, Paul?
Well, like a lot of other creative types, we wanted to raise some awareness of our project and also raise some funds to help continue it.
Right.
In our case, we wanted to make it more self-sustaining.
Right.
But for other people, you may need funds to help finish your project.
And why did we choose Kickstarter?
We chose Kickstarter because it's kind of, I guess, the cool thing to do.
Yeah. And it's also an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah.
So if you fully fund, you get the money. If you don't fully fund, you don't.
Yeah. So there's more at stake there.
Right. So we took the risk.
Even though we did a comic book Kickstarter, a lot of the things that we say in here can be applied to other creative projects as well.
Right. So now that you've decided to do a Kickstarter, you have to set a goal that you want to try to raise. As we mentioned, Kickstarters are all or nothing propositions. So you need to come up with a reasonable number, a reasonable amount of money that you can raise based on the project you're doing and really the size of your mailing list.
When you're setting the goal, you also need to keep in mind that Kickstarter takes a cut, and then you also may need to pay taxes.
Right, and there's also a charge for, since everything's done with a credit card, then you have to pay a credit card fee, which is like 3%. And then you also have to realize that out of that money you're raising, not only are you paying for your project, but you're also fulfilling the rewards that you've put out there. And then shipping is involved as well.
So before you get started, it's best to have a mailing list.
And how big of a mailing list should you have?
If you're just starting out, you should have a mailing list of at least 100 people.
That's what we keep hearing as a recommendation.
So that's a good number. To build the mailing list, you start with your friends and family, the people that are closest to you, and then anyone that you've had a meaningful conversation with within the last year.
And we also had done a couple of events. We did a signing on Free Comic Book Day, which also helps because it's a chance to meet people, and you need to, I guess, work with a comic book store to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we also did a small convention, the San Fernando Valley Comic Book Convention.
Yeah.
And we're also able to meet some people and add them to the mailing list as well.
So the purpose of a mailing list is to keep people updated about your project as well as other things that you're doing in relation to it.
And how do we do that?
Well, we used MailChimp
Mm-hmm.
to help send out a weekly newsletter called The Hound Dog's Howl.
And why do we call it the Hound Dog's Howl?
Because that's the name of the school paper in Power Squared.
So now that you have a mailing list, you decide to do a Kickstarter, you need to have rewards. And they need to be something that is obtained, that you can actually do.
Yes.
And they need to be delivered in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
And so you need to do a little... You need to kind of line things up ahead of time. You can't just launch into it. What we were doing is trying to come up with some unique items for the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
One of which was this T-shirt that Paul's wearing. And actually, I'm wearing, but it looks better on Paul. We were trying to find something that we could do that was unique to the Kickstarter, and these T-shirts were sort of part of the collegiate atmosphere that we were trying to create for the comic book.
Yeah.
And so, since we're not artists, we needed to find somebody to actually do the work. So we hired our current artist, Rachel Wells, to design a mascot and to design the logo that you see. Again, so we came up with this T-shirt and another one that's sort of just the mascot. And then we wanted to have, we used a graphic novel idea that Artist America had come up with for us.
Yes.
Which we took the first 5 issues and made a hardback trade out of it. So that was just another way that you could acquire the comic books. And those were sort of unique items that weren't available prior.
Yeah.
The actual comic books themselves, we also offered a print and a digital version.
Yeah. Which we priced based on our research into other comic book based Kickstarters.
Right.
Then for people who ordered all 9 issues physically, we also threw in a sticker and a magnet.
And then we also had one other thing that was you get to name a character. I'd seen that in some other Kickstarters for comic books, that you get to name a character in a future issue. Usually it's the issue that they're selling, but in our case it's a future issue.
Yeah.
And so we priced that accordingly. And then if you ordered that, we only had 3. If you ordered that, you also got digital copies of the 2 comic books that we're trying to sell.
Yeah,
Right.
as well as the arc that you appear in.
So that you've decided to do a Kickstarter, you have to actually set up a page on Kickstarter.
When you're going through that process, Kickstarter will actually help you out. It'll give you a template and the kinds of things that you should be putting in there, as well as any other information related to it. You can set it up however you want, though, but it has to be attractive and give enough information that will make people want to invest in it.
Because you are competing with not every other Kickstarter out there, but also every other comic book Kickstarter out there. And it's important that you sort of stand out and at least also explain what you're doing.
Now, doing a Kickstarter video is optional, but it helps to have one.
Pretty much everybody seems to have one.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
You can do it any way you want, but we decided to go for a pre-edited style of it.
Some people do animated videos, and some people do like what we did, which was like stand up and talk about it.
Yeah.
And some people do a combination of the two.
Yeah, so it can be whatever as long as it's visually appealing and you just kind of follow, I guess, general rules of cinematography.
Yeah, don't cross the axis and things like that. So before you get ready to launch, you need to start getting the word out that you're actually going to do it. We use our newsletter, as we mentioned before, to talk about doing the Kickstarter. We talked about it for a long time before it actually came out. And we also use our weekly videos like this one to talk about it. We also tried to get some press.
Getting press is kind of dependent on the sort of Kickstarter you're trying to do. You should figure out news outlets that you can reach, or like, say, magazines that are relevant to what you're doing,
right?
If you choose to go that route as well. So what we did for our press was I looked up a list of comic book news outlets and then picked some of the bigger names that I recognized, dug into the website to figure out how to contact them.
Right.
It's usually in a contact us page or maybe hidden in an about us page.
And so we wrote up a press release, which, again, you can learn how to do online or by looking at other people's press releases, which are usually available online.
Yeah.
And sent it in to, I think it was 8 or 9 people.
Yeah.
And one of them chose to run it.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, great for us.
Yeah. I mean, 1 out of 8 still isn't bad.
No. We also publicized it on social media, and we also used, again, personal contacts, people that are on the mailing list that hey, I'm doing this Kickstarter. And then you also hope then that there's word of mouth, which I don't think how much that really helped us, but it is something that you hope people will talk about. Hey, I know this guy's doing a Kickstarter, and you should support it.
Yeah.
So that's another way you could get the word out that you're doing it.
As for social media ads, we will mention that we've had kind of an iffy return with Facebook ads.
Yeah, for us, every time we've done 2 or 3 Facebook ads, usually trying to get people to actually sign up for the newsletter or awareness of the Kickstarter, and it turns into a lot of likes on Instagram, but not very much, action.
Yeah.
And so I personally don't think they're really worth, even though they don't cost very much, they haven't really proven to actually help us. And the other thing we wouldn't recommend using is companies that help boost your Kickstarter. One of the things that you'll find as soon as you put a Kickstarter up is they'll come out of the woodworks to offer you help. And we actually did, because of me, I was a little panicky about the Kickstarter early on. And I hired a company to help boost the Kickstarter. And it didn't cost very much, but I'm not really sure how much of an impact we got from them.
Yeah.
It's, again, not to totally discount it. We may have gotten one person that they targeted, and we may have gotten one person from a Facebook ad, but it's negligible what we got out of it.
Yeah, so avoid using boosting services if you can.
Right. So if you're like us and you were able to fund, now what? One of the things you need to do is when you're thinking of your reward tiers is who's actually going to fulfill those for you. I wouldn't recommend for us, we have a comic book, I wouldn't recommend you printing them yourself because you're not set up to do it. So you need to find somebody that can actually print them for you. We had lined up prior to doing the Kickstarter, worked out with the people that we wanted to fulfill the different rewards. As we mentioned, Artith Merrick was going to do the T-shirts and the graphic novel or hardback trade. And then we also had lined up Kablam to handle the actual physical printing of the comic books. And they were willing to actually distribute it for us.
Yeah.
fulfilled the Kickstarter and add the stickers and the magnet to those that had the 9 issues.
If you can't line up anything beforehand, then in the Kickstarter Creators Handbook, which you'll be able to read when you start to set it up, they will give you a list of a lot of companies that they recommend to help fulfill any kind of reward that you're looking to do.
Now, then we also had digital fulfillment. And again, this may go back to another thing you should be doing is listening to other people that are doing Kickstarters, because I learned from somebody how they handled digital distribution, which was through Box. And that allowed us to we could do that as well. And so that's how we did the digital distribution ourselves. So that's free and easy to do, actually. So now you want to make sure that during the Kickstarter and after the Kickstarter, you want to be able to send updates to your backers.
Yeah.
And again, Kickstarter is pretty good about having that mechanism set up. You can actually send updates to particular types of reward tiers.
Yeah.
So you can send one to everybody, or you can send one to just people that are getting t-shirts, or somebody that's just getting physical copies of the comic book, depending on how your reward tiers are set up.
Yeah.
You can specify what group you want to update. We did some updates during the Kickstarter about how we were doing with the funding. We also did them after the Kickstarter, telling people when the orders were sent in, when the orders were fulfilled, and we'll probably do another one just to make sure everybody got everything they asked for. So updates is a really good thing that you can do. And then you can also email people individually if you're trying to get information from them specific to their reward.
So if you hit a snag at any point, it's very important to tell people about it.
Yeah, you don't want to have a situation where it's going to take twice as long and they wonder where is everything. So you have to keep people informed what's going on. So one of the things that you have to do to fulfill the orders is send out backer surveys. And this is I think Kickstarter is really good about kind of pushing you into doing that. And there's different types of surveys based on what your rewards are.
Yes.
For us, with a physical reward, we needed a mailing address of everybody. With a digital fulfillment, you needed to make sure you knew the email address they want you to send it to.
Yeah.
And then we had a little added thing with the character names. What name you want to name the character? And we were looking for a major for the college.
So with the backer surveys, you need to make a new survey for every single reward tier. Keep in mind that the more reward tiers you have and the more things you offer, the more surveys you're going to make and the more questions you'll have to ask.
Yeah, literally if it was 2 issues physical, I had to redo it for 4 issues. You have to, it is every tier has to have its own reward survey.
And it's very important that backers actually fill the survey, because if they don't, then they can't get their reward.
Right. And then what we were also trying to do with ours is send all the physical stuff at one time. Have all the comic books printed and shipped at one time. Have the t-shirts printed and shipped at one time. And the hardback trade printed and shipped at one time. So it was important to make sure that everybody who needed something physical had already turned theirs in before we started fulfilling. With the digital, there's actually still 2 people that never filled out the survey. But because we had their email address through the Kickstarter, we've sent them the digital comics. But it's really recommended that if you back a Kickstarter, that you fill out the survey. And we would encourage you have to be a little understanding that people may not be as quick to turn them in as you like, but then that's one of the things that you can use Kickstarter to help you with.
But then also just keep in mind it's possible that some people just never will fill out the survey for whatever reason.
Right.
Yes.
So having decided to do another one, what would we do differently?
Well, first we would scale back our goal
Right.
to be more reasonable and more possible to fulfill. We'd increase our mailing list and press presence. Doing the latter will be easier now that we've had a successful Kickstarter. It would also reduce the number of reward tiers.
Right, because we had just a lot.
Yeah. Too many.
And again, this is our first time to do one, and there's only so much, education you can do with, it's practical knowledge.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping that what we went through will help you if you decide to do one yourself. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
So until next week, I'm David Hankins.
I'm Paul
And
Hankins.
this has been a special A Week in Power Squared.